What's up, Sales RXers? Look, with outbound conversion rate benchmarks being as low as 3%, it's no secret that it's really tough right now for a lot of sellers. And if you're an individual contributor or a senior leader in marketing, RevOps, sales, any role that has a revenue related metric that you have to attain, it's time to find a better pipeline channel. So, what's better than selling to someone who doesn't know you or your product? Selling to someone who does. This is where Champify comes in. Champify monitors key contacts at accounts like champions, post-sale sponsors, admins, heavy users, and they enrich that data to detect job changes, determine relevancy for outreach, and then assigns and alerts reps with those newly assigned leads. So if you haven't tried out Champify yet, you need to give it a shot. Stop spinning your wheels with outbound heavy sales motions and start selling to people you've already sold to. You can click the link below in the show description for an extended proof of concept and free data test from the team at Champify. What you'll do is click podcast in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Let them know that the Sales RX podcast sent you so they know who to give the VIP treatment to. Now let's jump into today's episode.
I was watching Rick Rubin get interviewed by Anderson Cooper on CNN, and he's like, Anderson, you mind if we just meditate here for a few minutes before I start? And then like they just straight up meditated in silence for like 5 minutes on CNN.
That's like the one where Kanye was on Joe Rogan. Everybody cut it together where he's just silent and he's like, "I just said a prayer for you," and Joe Rogan's like, "Okay." Like that makes me think of that where it's just like. There we go, folks. Travis Tyler just meditated and gave me a prayer for the podcast. So we're ready to rock. Let's do it. So tell people what's up, Travis. What do you do with content creation? How does that go into your role? And then specifically, like, let's talk about your journey in that content creation and how this became a thing that you're doing. And then let's give the folks third part of the episode. Let's give them some tactical pieces of advice on how they can shed that embarrassment and get started. And hey, do I even need to create content, right? Like some people, it might not be for them. So how can I support the people that are creating content at my company? Let's dive into it.
For sure, man. So I've been with Pandadoc for 3.5 years. I've grown our LinkedIn audience from about 16,000 to over 100,000 in about 2 years. And I did a lot of that through just creative content development, thinking outside the box. And when everybody in B2B was going left, I went right. And I wanted to stop people mid-scroll. And that has been my goal from day number one, is just get their attention, because it's so hard to do that nowadays. So that's kind of like my little credibility factor of like who I am, what I do. Before then, I was in marketing at another startup for about 4 years, just kind of getting my feet wet. In just marketing operations and generalism. Before then, I was in sales for about 2 years. It was a very interesting, sales adjacent job. I was a college recruiter where I would find high school students across the country, and some of them were cold, some of them were warm, and I would reach out and try to sell them a $200,000 liberal arts degree. And I did that for 2 years and hit quota or exceeded quota in each one of my territories. I had New York, Colorado, and Pennsylvania. And it was a lot of fun, but it was exhausting. So that was where I kind of got my sales bearings, though, is just literally flying across the country out of Florida into 50 different high schools in New York, Colorado, and Pennsylvania, and just walking in there, not knowing like who I'm meeting with, who I'm talking to, and trying to deliver presentations and talk to high school students and figure out what do they want to do for the rest of their lives. It was really interesting. But I want people to know like what my background is and how I went from sales into marketing, and then specifically like content creation at a SaaS startup.
Yeah, and people complain about trying to sell point solutions, and like you said, you're over here selling high school kids $200,000 liberal arts degrees. So you're really like you're basically on par with like people going door to door selling Kirby vacuums. I mean, that's a tough sell, bud. Like that's pretty impressive.
Oh yeah, dude. It helped that we had a school on the beach, and so all these kids up north were like, "Get me the hell out of here." But yeah, I felt like a fax machine salesman, copy salesman.
Oh man. So let's talk about, all right, so you make this move into marketing. Where does this thing about content come in? Because I'm looking at your LinkedIn. I mean, everybody and their mother has a podcast now, has a TikTok, is trying to do sales comedy. Most people will do a podcast for 10 episodes and then they stop doing it because they realize to make it good, it's a lot of work, or or it's just not good and they don't get any engagement because they're not putting a lot of time and effort into it. Or same with TikTok, like they get stuck in the 200 view to 300 view purgatory and they stop doing it. So like everybody and their mother who's got an iPhone or a podcast mic, Blue Yeti mic, has probably tried some variation of this at some point since COVID. But you were doing this back in August of 2019. So you were pre-COVID. You were kind of like a, what do they call it? Like an early adopter of video and content in terms of marketing and creating content. So like, how did this idea kind of come about in mid 2019 where you're like, hey, there's a better way to do what we're trying to do in terms of like marketing and educating customers and engaging with potential buyers and building pipeline, this whole concept of like Salespedia. How did this kind of spur out?
It started with me graduating from a improv comedy program. It was like a 2-year program I did in Tampa Bay, Florida, and I joined a couple of house teams where I would perform every weekend and was just having fun being up on stage. And we'll get into like some of the lessons I think sellers can learn and content creators can learn from improv, and how it can be one of the best things you ever invest in. And that's my statement. Um, we started by just recapping our most popular blog articles.
Hmm.
We were driving a pretty good amount of inbound traffic. We were using the HubSpot inbound, SEO content creation methodology, and we were pretty successful at it at Pandadoc. We just created hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of blog articles over a couple years. And I took a look in Google Analytics, picked the top, 5, 10 most like organic traffic pages, most organic converting pages, and just decided let's do some recaps of these blog articles. We'll do 2-3 minutes, and they weren't funny. They were just like high energy, professional, quick, and good.
Yeah.
And a couple of marketing leaders saw me do that, and they were like, "Dude, you're great. Let's do more." And I was
Hmm.
like, "Okay." And then we hired a new marketing guy to kind of help with narrative storytelling. And he's like, let's do a podcast. I was like, we already have a podcast. And he's like, oh. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not in it. It's just like a sales podcast that we interview other sellers on. But like, we have one. And at the time, we were working with an agency to help us just like get our feet wet. And that's how we kind of got started in that media space. And then I said, okay, I want to create my own show, and it's going to be a business comedy show. Um, and I want to do it in person, even though it's unsafe to do so during COVID. I will take tests. I will, get my vaccines every time, but I want to do it in person. Like I said earlier, everyone was going left. I wanted to go right.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted people to see something different on their feed with my face and my co-host face, which was Patrick Downs. He was one of our sales enablement managers, and he was a kick-ass negotiator and account executive at Pandadoc. He now works at Sapling, which got acquired by a different company. But him and I really kind of set the standard and did 30 episodes together for about a year and a half.
Yeah. And just for everybody that's listening that maybe lives on the moon or something and doesn't know about Panda Doc and what Travis and his team are doing over there, his podcast, the Customer Engagement Lab, uh, incredible work. I mean, it's in person, it's in a professional studio, it's well lit, you got camera operators, it looks great, it's well edited. The format is fun. I know I watched the episode with Nick where you're like showing like funny videos and stuff ahead of time. Like they shoot the shit beforehand. They get to know each other. He poses some great questions. I told him when he was coming on this podcast, I was like, hey, the lack of preparation and homework I have for you is probably disturbing, seeing how well your podcast is done. But I noticed that too. And that's why we try to do something different. We try to do these 15-minute episodes, micro learning. If we hit 30 minutes, we just split them into 2 parts because yeah, people are bored as shit of the 30-minute. Let's talk about your journey. It's like, all right, cool. But you're really doing something different and unique over there. Even on your TikToks, you're in a panda costume half the time. You're acting wacky, release some great content. You give your own take. It's very unfiltered a lot of times, which people appreciate that transparency. So I love in this story that it's like, I saw this thing that was happening in something that has nothing to do with business. It was improv, right? Like totally unrelated to SaaS. And I saw an opportunity and an avenue to pursue it. And I was right. It worked out. Here we are. Let's talk about those lessons or those principles you learned at improv. You don't have to give all the secret tips away, but like, what are the top two, like, or what are the highlights or the most important ones that you think people should take away from this episode that you learned in improv that help people create content and kind of get out of their shell?
One of the biggest things holding back every adult is their fear of embarrassment, their fear of looking stupid, their fear of getting made fun of people thinking less of them. And it's a fear of shame. And it scares people from taking risks. It scares people from saying how they really feel. And improv is an environment that encourages shame and attacks shame. And it's a safe group that's like, be silly. No, sillier. No, you're still not silly enough. You're holding back. Commit. That is what improv does, is it just absolutely eradicates you of looking or feeling stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, and it's
it's
so
one of the
true.
most powerful things that can unlock your ability to perform, your ability to speak, your ability to let go of the outcome, which is big in sales, and to have the goal of being the person having the most fun in the room at all times.
Yeah, you watch any SNL, you can definitely see it, especially on like more recent episodes. They're just getting zanier and zanier with what they're doing, and they're riding that wave out. It's like, okay, it's kind of silly, and then they take it really far, and then it's sillier, and then they kind of beat the dead horse and make it as ridiculous as possible. Makes me think of like the Californian sketch. You know what I mean? Like that's one of the greatest sketches of all time, in my opinion. And like the accent gets dumber and dumber and dumber as the thing goes on. It's like, how far down the rabbit hole can we take this?
Are you talking
Um,
about the Fred Armisen skit?
Yeah, with Bill Hader and
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
talking about doing direct. And what's funny is if you live in LA, I live in LA, right? That is so true. And you don't even know you're doing it half the time. Now the accent is super ridiculous and over the top, but you do that. Like half the conversations you have with people when you talk about, oh, have you been to this place? Oh, where's it at? Oh, it's over here. Oh, how'd you get there? Oh, well, we took the 405 down to this, down to, and it's like we do that. Half our story is about how we got there because the traffic is so bad. So it's like an art form on how you get places. It's ridiculous, but it's such a great sketch. And it's Bill Hader talks about in that sketch. He's like, you see me laughing and breaking down because I just realized this is so freaking stupid, but it was so funny at that point. And sometimes that stupidity, that over the top, that exaggeration is really what tickles people's funny bone. And in terms of marketing, it's just eyeballs, right? So if something goes viral for PandaDoc, hey, it may not have anything to do with signature software, proposal writing software, anything like that, but it's getting eyeballs on what they do, who they are, and then that then leads them down that rabbit hole if it is relevant, right? I mean, your awareness part of your AIDA funnel is not to get everybody that's a fit for your product. That's why the funnel is a funnel. It's not a net of a bunch of fish. Like, so a lot of fish leave the net. That's why it's a funnel, and it narrows down the farther you go down. But the goal is to really generate that awareness. I don't think people take enough hold of that, man. And they get worried about their brand and they get protective of it, which is something I'd like to chat with you about. What's kind of the way that you've worked that relationship out with your team in terms of brand guidelines and how far they're willing to take it, and how do you have that healthy collaboration where you go, hey, I think we need to push the envelope a little bit more here, hey, I think we need to be a little unhinged here. Like, what are some ways in which you manage that as the content creator for PandaDoc?
So one of my favorite, I guess, comedian greats of all time is John Cleese. He's from Monty Python. It's a very, quintessentially British comedy. So for those that aren't familiar, he has a quote that says, "The aim of any good English gentleman is to get safely to his grave without ever having been embarrassed." And I think I feel like that's the aim of a lot of business people. And when it comes to my agreement with PandaDoc, I have had to cross the line a couple of times just to know where it is. And I intentionally did that early on. And when I have had to get feedback from people like, hey, that's you crossed the line or you did too much, I had to take it in stride and just be like, cool. Like, it's just like getting feedback or notes after I've done an improv sketch. Like, I just want to get better and I want to make people laugh. And unfortunately, with like video content, I don't always know when somebody's laughing because like I'm not there with them sitting next to them watch it or seeing them smile or anything. As opposed to being on stage, I immediately know because I got laughs if it's landing or it's not. But to walk away and just be like, I'm always trying to improve. I'm always trying to do better. And yeah, don't take the feedback as like, hey, you crossed a line. You are a bad person. Don't ever do this again. I I have to like any part of me that wants to like take that to heart. Like, no, dude. Like you crossed a line. It's all good. You were trying to ruffle some feathers. You're trying to do something different. Good for you, Trav. Like you did that. Let's take it back a little bit. Let's learn from this. Let's dial it up. Let's make the humor a little bit smarter, a little bit sharper for the next one. And you got it. And that mentorship has been really helpful of just the people at PandaDoc, the marketing leadership that I've had, especially like two of my bosses have been with me for 3+ years,
Mm-hmm.
almost my entirety of being here. I think where sometimes people struggle is when they like one of my coworkers, unfortunately, he's had like 7 different bosses here at PandaDoc. And I'm like,
Oh man.
shit, dude. So you
Yeah.
build a level of trust
Uh-huh.
over those years of like, I trust you to know where the line is. And when you cross it, to own it, apologize, and move on.
Yeah.
And that's what I do.
It's crucial. I always tell people I'd rather have honest conflict than dishonest harmony because nobody learns from dishonest harmony. It's like everybody's just patting each other on the back using their corporate speak when in reality there's completely different things happening behind closed doors. It's like, no, let's just surface it up. I know we're a little bit over time here. I wanted to be cognizant of your schedule. You got time for one more question as we round out the episode?
Yes, sir.
All right. So content creation is not for everybody. This is not a podcast episode saying that you are going to fail if you're a seller and you're not creating content. I am a firm believer, though. That you can support your colleagues that are creating content. If you're an SDR and you have another SDR colleague who's sending relevant content about your industry and business out to people, send their content. Hey, this is something one of our other reps at the company created. I thought it'd be relevant for you. I thought you'd find it funny, or I wanted to just add a little humor to your day. What are some ways that people can not create content if they're really not comfortable with it and they just don't have the knack for it, but can still support the people at the company that are creating content? Like, what are some things that your people at PandaDoc do that support the content creation that you're doing with the marketing team?
First and foremost is the anonymous lurking. Try to do that less. Like stuff, give it a thumbs up, put in one comment. That's it. That's all you need to do. And don't comment with the intention that the person's going to reply. I mean, so maybe they will if they're a good content creator, maybe they won't. But give them a little love. That's the best thing that you can do for a content creator at your organization. A rising tide lifts all boats. And so if you give a little bit of love to the folks in your org, on your team, in your network, um, props on their content, like it's gonna be reciprocal, and they'll give it right back if and when you decide you want to post something. I have folks on my team who post once a month, and I make sure to like encourage them both publicly and privately, and give them some kudos and engage in a conversation with them so they don't feel like they're just shouting into the wind.
Mm-hmm. Especially when they are creating the content, because you might not think it, but we're all self-conscious about the content we create. It's just human nature, right? It's just human nature
Oh,
that
for
we're always
sure.
going to be self-conscious about the content we create. And then even just a message of, man, dude, that video had me laughing my ass off. Oh, great. Like that make you feel so good, make you so much more confident walking into your next video. With podcasting, anytime someone's like, hey, I listened to this episode, I thought this was really interesting that this person said, I'm like, holy crap, you listened to the whole episode. That's amazing. You didn't just like digest the short form content. You actually listened to the whole episode. I walk into another recording with such better energy because I feel fulfilled that somebody is engaging with it and spoke to someone, even if it's just one person. So I totally agree with you. Rising
My
tide
last
lifts all boats. I love that. That's awesome.
my last piece of advice on that too is if you're just getting started to create content, do not have the expectation that anyone you love or hold close and near and dear to your heart is going to give a shit about your content. My wife, my biggest supporter in life, has watched maybe 3 episodes of my podcast. It's just not her thing. It's just not. It's
Yeah.
not the way she shows affection. She's not interested in it. She'll watch it out of kindness if I ask her to, but no. So don't be disappointed when those around you, like your family, your friends, don't really care about the content you're creating. If you keep showing up and you keep being you and you attempt to provide some form of value, whether that's entertainment, whether that's insight, whether that's education, whether that's just personal reflection, if you keep going at it, I promise somebody will eventually stumble upon it and it'll mean a lot to them. And they
Yeah.
may never tell you.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just like you said, Chet, like, wow, you listened to the whole thing? I never thought I had a coworker who's like, I've listened to every single episode you've ever done. And I'm like, I've done 67 episodes. So like I've watched every single one. And I'm like,
Yeah.
why didn't you tell me? Like
Yeah.
a year and a half ago. They're like, I don't know. But I love your
Mm-hmm.
stuff, man. I'm like, cool. See you at the next holiday party next year.
Yeah. See you 67 episodes from now.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm the
So
same.
have no expectation.
It's totally true. I'm the same way. My shout out to Kevin Hopp. He does his weekly cold call show on LinkedIn Live. But my wife will like talk to me on like a Tuesday night. She'll be like, "Oh, did you see that meeting that Kevin booked from his show?" And I'm like, "Honey, what was the last podcast episode I released? Who was on?" She doesn't know, but she watches his content but it's a good format. It's a great show. It's a good format. You know what I mean? And so I always think that's funny because I feel the exact same thing. It's like, I get some support, but it's like, what was the last podcast episode I released? What did we talk about? She's like, oh, I don't know. But I watched Kevin's show and I saw him book 2 meetings. And I'm like, there you go. We got nothing but love for Kevin. So his cold call show basically streams in our house Tuesday mornings when he's doing it. So, but yeah, I feel you there. And that's, not setting that expectation can help so much when it doesn't happen, because it won't. I think my dad just started listening to a couple podcast episodes because I was just like, hey, give me some feedback, because I don't feel like I'm getting enough critical feedback. Like, I've been podcasting for 2 years and he just started listening to episodes, and he listened to 3 of them and he said, you need to stop saying excited, say thrilled or honored. I'm like, I'm not going to tell people I'm honored to have them on the show, Dad. Like, that is so over the top. But hey, maybe thrilled is a good one. So I started integrating that. But I'm like, Dad, you don't know this world. Like, somebody might even think I'm being sarcastic. I'm like, I'm honored to have you on my show. Like,
You know what? I'm honored to be here, Chet. And Chet's dad, if you listen to this, I'm honored to be here, and I'm thrilled that you gave him that feedback.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I love it. Travis, how can people engage with you? You have the Customer Engagement Lab podcast on PandaDoc's website, which is awesome. If you haven't listened to it yet, any of the sales RXers out there, please go listen to it. It's incredibly engaging. It's probably one of, if not the best B2B podcast out there in terms of format and quality and content. But how else can people engage with you through LinkedIn and TikTok? What are your handles?
thank you, man. That means so much to me. I pour my soul into this. I really do. And the fact that you are so kind and gracious, it means a lot to me, genuinely. So thank you, Chet. People can reach me at the Customer Engagement Lab on TikTok. If you're not on TikTok, I feel sorry for you, man. The Chinese government, they got what they got from the balloon. Just get on the app and have some fun. It's the best algorithm built probably of all time. It's not just teenagers dancing. I promise it's whatever you're into. You're the one that dictates what the algorithm gives you. But go follow me there and laugh with me and have some fun.
Yeah, I'm loving what's happening on TikTok, because it's not just dancing. I had a Gen X VP of sales say, "Man, I've been watching your TikToks for a couple months now, and I feel like we speak the same language." And that stuck with me, because I'm like, dude, you are not TikTok's primary audience, but here we are. It's creeping in, man. It's creeping in. We're taking over a little bit. So, Travis, I was honored to have you on today. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for giving us some great content. We'll make sure to get you some listeners over to the podcast and some people engaging with you on TikTok. For any of the Sales RXers and first-time listeners out there that are interested in engaging with the Sales RX community or the Sales Doctor further, we will have links to every piece of content that you can access in the show notes below, as well as links to Travis's LinkedIn, his TikTok, and his podcast as well. We appreciate all the listeners, and we will catch you next week. Thank you.
Hey, chat, let me end it with a quote for your audience.
Let's do it.
I learned that when I feel shame, I have taken a risk. I have pushed myself and my art in a very honest direction outside of my comfort zone. And remember, shame is like fear. It's neither good nor bad. It is simply an emotion.
Do we need more words? Is that a mic drop?
That's a mic drop, my man.
That's a mic drop. I love it, brother. Thank you so much for the time today.
Thanks, chat.